G'day everyone, welcome. Welcome to the 2024 Sydney Peace Prize Lecture and Award Ceremony. I'm Benjamin Law and I'm so grateful that you all came out tonight on a school night, no less. Thank you so much. It's an honour to be here with you all tonight and we're especially grateful that you're here as we race towards the end of this year, 2024. An especially brutal, violent and distressing year that reminds us how critical it is more than ever to come together to find ways of seeking peace and justice. It's why we're particularly chuffed and honoured to have Jagan Chapagain, Secretary General of the International Federation of the Red Cross, receiving this year's Sydney Peace Prize on behalf of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent movement, who will also be delivering tonight's lecture. We are, of course, here gathered on the ancient lands of the Gadigal, and it makes me think about how First Nations people on this continent have been sharing knowledge and resolving conflict peacefully for tens of thousands of years, with those First Nations here constituting the oldest continuing civilization this planet has ever seen and known. So to kick off tonight's proceedings, I'd like to introduce 16-year-old Oriel Smith, who will deliver an acknowledgement of country, followed by a song, Yari Yarang, from the new musical Yellow Rock by Australian Indigenous artist Brittany Shipway. The song is part of a celebration of First Peoples culture and shared oral history, and it's shared tonight with permission. Oriel, along with Savannah Smith and Shania Budding, will then perform a dance featuring their own original choreography to Mitch Tampa's song Walanba. Please make them feel welcome.
Yama, Oriel Smith, Nai. Nai Camilroy, Nadinga Mure, Naana Lu, Wallabaga, Gadigal Butter. Hi, my name is Oriel and I'm Camilroy. My totem is the possum. All of us here tonight are on the homelands of the Gadigal. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land where we all meet this evening, the Gadigal. The grass tree people who border the Wangal in the west, Bidjigal to the east, Camaragal to the north, and Gamai to the south. I pay my deep respects to our elders of the past as they cared and nurtured our motherland for thousands and thousands of years. And I pay my respects to our elders of today as they share the knowledge and stories to our elders of the future. And I acknowledge any other Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people present here this evening. On this day, as you gather for the Sydney Peace Prize presentations, I want to especially acknowledge that my people have been telling stories and teaching on this land through dance, song, and artwork for thousands of generations before us. We are the oldest living, surviving, thriving, and beautiful culture. And after years of historic oppression, we are still here. We are still here despite being prohibited from speaking our language, despite our children being stolen. But we have survived through all this, and we will continue to do so and thrive in the process. Our people are strong. Our people are strong, they are smart, they are creative, and they are wise. Our connection to Mother Earth and country heals us as we walk on her every single day. It is important that we all show our respect for Mother Earth and honour our nation's true shared history through truth-telling. Shortly, I will share a song with you that is very close to my heart, Yari Yarang, from the new musical Yellow Rock, by the incredibly talented Indigenous artist Brittany Shipway. Yari Yarang means goodbye, I'll see you soon in Gumbaynggirr. It's a farewell song to spirits passing over into the dreaming and evokes peace. It is presented tonight with permission. Following this, I'm delighted to present a dance work choreographed by myself and my fellow dancers, Shania and Savannah. We are very proud members of the New South Wales Public Schools Aboriginal Dance Company. This piece, Wallenbar, represents being pushed and pulled as young First Nations peoples in today's society. In closing, I would like to ask you all to take a pause and close your eyes and pay respect to country. How she provides for you through food, water, spirit, and through life. We thank her. This is, was, and always will be Aboriginal land.
Farewell to starry skies above. You leave us now down on the ground, but in the soul of life you live. You journey on into the dream. You're welcomed home by heroes past. Our sun began the Southern Cross and broke Gangan. And when your song flies past the river into the ocean land, I'll drink Father Uladala. He will embrace you in the dark. Till then I'll call you, and you shall answer in return. And when your silence rings out true, we'll know you'll eat and wood by tree. Yadi yada. Farewell to starry skies above. You leave us now down on the ground, but in the soul of life you live.
How impressive was that? Another round of applause for Oriel, Shania, and Savannah, everyone. That was really remarkable. And I don't know about for the rest of you, especially the fellow non-Indigenous people in the room, but I feel so grateful and humbled that we as new people on this continent can be welcomed with such grace and energy and vigour from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, especially the younger generation. None of tonight would be possible without the partners of the Sydney Peace Foundation and the support of everyone here tonight, so thank you so much for coming. We'd also like to thank our present-day leaders for making tonight possible, especially from the City of Sydney and our patron, Lord Mayor Clover, who has supported, yes. Lord Mayor Clover has supported the Sydney Peace Prize for years, and the University of Sydney, which has housed the Sydney Peace Foundation since its founding in 1998. Special thanks also to this year's partners, the University of Sydney Faculty of Medicine and Health, Western Sydney University School of Law and School of Medicine and Health, Amnesty International Australia, and the New South Wales Teachers Federation. Thank you so much. Now, as you came in, you might have noticed on your chair, or under your chair, not a scented candle, I'm not Oprah, but you will have seen information about the Sydney Peace Prize raffle and silent auction. And on there, you will see QR codes, and if you don't see a leaflet with a QR code, well, we've prepared one earlier, and you can scan it right now. That will take you to a link where there are over 60 incredible items, including artworks by Ben Quilty and George Giddos, holidays, and your chance to win a luxury cruise on the stunning Kimberley coastline with Coral Expeditions worth over $40,000. So please be in it to win it. It's all going to a really good cause to support peace and justice and the work of our Sydney Peace Prize laureate. Now, for 26 years now, the Sydney Peace Foundation has recognised champions for social, economic and climate justice, including household names and titans of global thinking and leaders like Desmond Tutu, Noam Chomsky and Naomi Klein, as well as movements such as Black Lives Matter and the Uluru Statement from the Heart. Last year, the award recognised the Woman Life Freedom Movement and the women and men who continue to fight for freedoms in Iran. You'll see the faces of all these champions in this new Sydney Peace Foundation video created by a very talented Sydney Peace Foundation intern, Seville, who I believe is volunteering tonight. Extra points if you spot Seville in the video. You won't get a cruise or a valuable artwork, but you will get my respect, which is priceless. Here's the video.
The day I dream about is the day when justice with peace has arrived in Australia.
Let's not make this an easy conversation. Let's be courageous and talk about what is happening today.
No place is safe, no ecosystem is safe, no communities are safe.
Civilization has developed a means of destruction that can only be used against those who are too weak to retaliate in kind. And now I'd like to invite a really special guest to the stage, Mohamed,
Mohamed is a dedicated human rights defender and advocate who sits on the Sydney Peace Foundation Council and Peace Prize jury. He's also the head of Philanthropy and the Occupied Palestinian Territory and Israel spokesperson for Amnesty International Australia. Please make him welcome.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Sydney Peace Prize award ceremony and lecture. I too would like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I also pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. The Sydney Peace Foundation was founded in 1998 by Professor Stuart Rees to promote peace with justice, human rights, and non-violence by recognising world leaders for peace. The prize remains Australia's only international prize for peace. We are grateful for our patron, the Lord Mayor of Sydney, Clover AO, for her unwavering support of not only the foundation, but for human rights and justice. The Lord Mayor is responsible for the city being a refugee welcome zone, has backed the Racism Not Welcome Here campaign, is a staunch defender of protest rights, and is a constant advocate for peace. Sydney Peace Prize laureates are some of the world's most effective peacemakers. They find solutions to the world's most pressing problems and inspire us to be the change that we want to see. Past laureates include Dr. Hanan Ashrawi, Vandana Shiva, Arundhati Roy, and former Amnesty Secretary-General Irene Khan, who is now the UN Special Rapporteur on the promotion and protection of freedom of expression. As an Australian of Palestinian descent, the last year has been devastating. And I know that this feeling of constant grief and mourning is shared by many in the room tonight. As a member of the Sydney Peace Foundation Jury and Council, I am proud and honoured to recognise the International Committee and Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent, whose network of more than 16 million volunteers and staff around the world are dedicated to working for the good of humanity. The movement's mission is to reduce or prevent human suffering wherever it is found. National societies embody the work and the principles of the movement in 191 countries. They provide disaster relief, health and social services, and educate the public on international humanitarian law, otherwise known as the rules of war. During times of armed conflict, national societies also assist civilian populations. The movement is impartial, neutral, and independent, whose sole humanitarian mission is to protect the lives and dignity of victims of war. And there is no doubt that the need for the movement has never been greater, with conflicts in the Sudan, Ukraine, and the occupied Palestinian territory, to name a few. The Red Cross and Red Crescent emblems are symbols of hope and humanity. They signify neutrality and protection during times of armed conflict. Yet in the occupied Palestinian territory, the Palestinian Red Crescent continue to come under attack. When awarding the prize this year, the jury especially recognised and acknowledged the brave heroes of the Palestinian Red Crescent who are operating in the most dangerous of conditions. Their teams have been attacked, tortured, killed, forcibly disappeared. Their ambulances and healthcare services damaged or destroyed. A chapter was first set up in Jerusalem and Palestine in 1910 and formed in a refugee camp in 1968 in Jordan to cater to the health needs of Palestinians. They became a national society in 1969. Ever since, they have been a key actor, providing health and social services, and they employ tens of thousands of Palestinian, Arab, and foreign national staff and volunteers. They have been working day and night to provide life-saving aid to those in Gaza. First responders take tremendous risks in attempting to reach casualties and those in need. I want to take a moment to share the story of Henida, an emergency medical technician. She describes her profession as one of hardship, struggle, exhaustion, and psychological pressure. She says that they know that they are a target at every moment and are constantly threatened with death. Her darkest times are when her colleagues leave smiling on a life-saving mission, only to return killed in their ambulances. But in the end, she says, what brings her happiness during her deepest despair is when she's in the street and someone says to her, "Do you remember how you saved me?" And her exhaustion disappears. Hanida is one of 1,600 Palestinian Red Crescent members who continue responding despite the risks to herself, her team, her family, and her colleagues. They endure the same conditions as the other 1.9 million Palestinians currently trapped in Gaza. In the occupied Palestinian territory, civilians, humanitarians, healthcare workers, journalists are all under attack despite being protected under international humanitarian law. They are and should never be a target. Over 300 humanitarians have been killed, including Australian Zomi Francom, and 885 healthcare workers. We have witnessed schools, hospitals, shelters, and refugee camps continue to be attacked or destroyed. In Gaza, no one and nowhere is safe. And now the violence and aggression has spilled into Lebanon, threatening to engulf the entire region, with UN peacekeepers, humanitarians, medical workers, and civilians also under attack. I believe in international law and justice, a system born from humanity's darkest moments to prevent the atrocities from World War II from ever recurring, serving the purpose of universal human rights protection. This year marks the 76th anniversary of the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the 75th anniversary of the Geneva Conventions. Yet the crisis in Gaza has made one thing painfully clear. The very architects of the international legal system are the very ones undermining it. A small but powerful few continue to flagrantly disregard and violate international law and international humanitarian law, undermining peace with justice, human rights, and freedom. While the global majority demand a ceasefire, they continue to act with full impunity. The Sydney Peace Foundation welcomes Australia's recent development of recognising the sovereignty of a Palestinian state. However, we call on Australia to take a stronger stance and do everything within its economic and diplomatic power to stop aggression, human rights abuses, war crimes, and violations of international humanitarian law. And most importantly, to take a universal approach when condemning and taking action against those who violate the international rules-based order. Those responsible for human rights atrocities, war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and violations of international humanitarian law must be held to account and face trial regardless of who they are. No one is above the law, and the international community must respect the rule of law. States, including Australia, must not and cannot accept blatant disregard of international law and international humanitarian law, as well as the binding decisions of the UN Security Council and the rulings of the International Court of Justice or the International Criminal Court. The longer impunity prevails, the longer human rights and the Geneva Conventions become irrelevant. States themselves designed the international legal system and humanitarian law to preserve, defend, and protect our common humanity. Failure to do so will only lead to more instability, aggression, and conflict, with civilians and humanitarians paying the ultimate price with their lives. Australia has a proud history in the formation of international law, with our former Foreign Minister Doc Everett helping draft the Universal Declaration. Today, more than ever, we must remember the spirit of the UDHR, the Geneva Conventions, and the principles of universality, protection, freedom, and peace with justice for all. Our humanity depends on it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohamed. Thank you so much for reminding us what's at stake, for the sobering accounts of other people's stories, and for spotlighting other people's work. And thank you for the work that you do, both with the Sydney Peace Foundation and also your work with Amnesty as well. It's very much appreciated. I'd now like to invite Lord Mayor Clover to the stage, and while she makes her way to the stage, I'd like to make a special mention of this striking new Peace Prize trophy by Indigenous artist Wayne McGuinness of Aboriginal Steel Art. That is right. She's making her debut tonight. It's quite a beautiful work, and Wayne has created this stunning design for the Sydney Peace Foundation, combining his iconic raindrop motif, which symbolises the interconnected impacts that we have on each other, with our signature dove, a timeless emblem of peace. It is a new trophy, and we'd like to also spotlight the fact that the $50,000 awards funds will go to the movement's operations in the occupied Palestinian territory. Our next guest is not just the Lord Mayor of Sydney, she is also patron of the Sydney Peace Foundation. And throughout her public life in both state and local government, Clover has championed progressive policies, achieving reforms that increase government transparency, champions our environment, and protects the vulnerable. The City of Sydney has supported the Sydney Peace Foundation for 24 years, and that's largely because of her. So please join me in welcoming City of Sydney Lord Mayor Clover Moore AO.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to Oriel for that beautiful welcome. Thank you, Benjamin, for emceeing, and thank you, Mohamed, for your words. I too would like to acknowledge the Gadigal of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to the elders, both past and present, and also acknowledge the people of the many nations who live in our city. And I'd like to acknowledge all the very many eminent guests who are here tonight, from the Australian Red Cross. And of course, it's been an honour to work with Professor Stuart Rees for all of these years. And I acknowledge Melanie Morrison, who's the director of the Sydney Peace Foundation, and Joy and Felix, the co-chairs. The work they do is so important. I acknowledge the Deputy Lord Mayor and councillors from the City of Sydney. So this year, the eminent Sydney Peace Prize jury selected the International Red Cross and the Red Crescent movement, as we've just heard from Mohamed. Congratulations, this is undoubtedly well-deserved, and recognition is needed more than ever because of the incredibly important work of this independent and impartial humanitarian network of more than 16 million volunteers and staff. The international situation is alarming. Currently, there are 120 major conflicts involving 60 states. In the past year, 162,000 people have died in armed conflicts. And around the world, 110 million people have been displaced by wars. In addition, an average of 50 volunteers and staff from humanitarian organisations are killed in conflicts each year, and many more are kidnapped. Through the recent escalation of violence in Gaza alone, 27 Palestinian Red Crescent Society volunteers have been killed, giving their lives while working to provide a lifeline to 2 million Palestinians. We use this recognition of their selfless, brave and heroic service to repeat calls for leaders to put an end to the suffering and deliver lasting peace and justice for all. The Sydney Peace Prize is Australia's only international award for peace. The City of Sydney has partnered with the Sydney Peace Foundation from its inception in 1998, as we too seek a peaceful, fair, just and compassionate world, and I am proud to be its patron. This year's highly respected recipients work in difficult and dangerous conditions to provide a lifeline to civilians, to reunite families, and improve access to essential services like water and electricity. Their independence and impartiality engender the respect of all sides in conflicts. And they use their neutrality to advocate for safe and sustained humanitarian access and for international humanitarian law. They advocate for the protection of civilians, medical facilities, and humanitarian personnel. It's especially significant this year, which marks the 75th anniversary of the Geneva Conventions, agreements that encompass international humanitarian law ratified by nearly every state in the United Nations. Standing up for peace, justice, and humanity is not just the responsibility of aid agencies. We are all responsible. We can use our voices, our education, and our many other advantages to help communities who need it most. Ordinary people can do extraordinary things. So congratulations again to the winners of the 2024 Sydney Peace Prize, the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. Your courageous and critical work is inspiring and reminds us of how precious it is to live in peace. Congratulations. Now, who am I going to present this to? Everyone can see us.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Benjamin. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mohamed, for that amazing speech. And, of course, I express my deep appreciation to distinguished members of the Sydney Peace Foundation for their decision to award this year's Sydney Peace Prize to International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. And I feel myself very fortunate to be able to receive this on behalf of the 16 million volunteers. As Lord Mayor said, the ordinary people do extraordinary work, and that's the story of every single volunteer who work in every part of the world. But of course, we heard a very passionate story from the occupied Palestinian territories. Before I start, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land we are gathered on, the Gadigal people of Eora Nation, and of course, pay my respect to their elders, past and present. It's an immense honor to accept the Sydney Peace Prize on behalf of the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. That is to say, our movement is a family. On behalf of the organization I lead, the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, the IFRC. On behalf of the International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC, and most of all, perhaps, on behalf of the 191 Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies around the world, including the Australian Red Cross here, who are present in the room. So from me, and from all of them, thank you. But also from me to all those volunteers all around the world, thank you to them too. It's because of their work we are here. As I mentioned, this award is primarily a testament to the dedication of the more than 16 million volunteers and staff working as part of those 191 National Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. It's a testament to them as they strive to protect lives and restore dignity, often in the most volatile and dangerous environments in the world. Their work reflects the core values that drive our movement and have driven it for 160 years, including 110 years here in Australia. Values that reflect our fundamental principles of humanity, impartiality, neutrality, independence, voluntary service, unity, and universality. I will talk more about the importance of those in a moment, but first, I must acknowledge early on the irony of accepting a peace prize at a time that there doesn't seem to be much peace. Across the Middle East, in Sudan, Myanmar, Ukraine, Russia, and in far too many other places, to list now, there are fierce hostilities. And of course, we heard the story of Gaza from Mohamed. I don't think I could elaborate that better than he did. There is no peace either for those ravaged by the climate crisis. Little peace from extreme heat, which kills almost 500,000 people every year, and fierce floods. And I know in Australia, you have experienced fierce floods and bushfires. For those forced from their homes, migration journeys are rarely easy, rarely peaceful. Communities ravaged by epidemics like mpox right now in Africa and cholera outbreaks, they don't feel peaceful either. And personal crises are becoming societal, whether due to external impacts or internal angst. Many people, particularly young people, have developed a sense of hopelessness and exclusion. There's no true inner peace when the internal is in turmoil. Just a few hours ago, I had a chance to visit a program run by the Australian Red Cross here in Sydney, where I witnessed the young parents, sometimes 13, 14-year-old. Many of them experience terrible domestic abuse, exclusion. That's not peace either. So the work of the Australian Red Cross to support these families, young parents to stand on their own feet, is also a major contribution to the peace. A different type of violence these young parents experienced. 13, 14 years old, pregnant, and excluded from home. That's not peace either. All this means the global humanitarian system faces unprecedented challenges. The latest full-year figures for 2023 showed a record 339 million people requiring international humanitarian assistance in circumstances driven by conflicts, climate disasters, health crises, increased population movements, or simple economic shocks. This was a significant increase from previous years. I'm afraid 2024 numbers are likely to be much worse. And wherever the official numbers end up, the true picture is likely to be worse still. That's both because many of those in need are so marginalized, they are not even recognized by systems meant to catch them. And also because crises of conflict, climate, and broadly confidence in the future know no borders. In an interconnected world, ripples spread to families and communities everywhere, including here in Australia. There's also a very specific and immediate crisis that I need briefly to divert to, a crisis which is hitting humanitarians hard, and both Lord Mayor and Mohamed alluded to that. Because before talking about the good those in our Red Cross Red Crescent movement do to address all this, I must talk about the bad that's being done to them. We are facing what may become the deadliest year ever for humanitarian workers. So far, 277 have been killed on duty, primarily local staff, whose death, though equally tragic, go far less notice in the media or in the political capitals than those of their international counterparts. Every human life, every life of humanitarian workers must be equally sacred. Thank you. Our movement has accounted for some of those deaths. This year, 2024, 30 from our member national societies and a further 6 from the ICRC. In just the Gaza-Israel conflict alone, over the 13 months since its major escalation, 28 have died. 6 from Magen David Adom in Israel, our national society there, 1 from the ICRC with another missing, and 21 from the Palestinian Red Crescent Society, the PRCS. Volunteer paramedic from the PRCS, Mohamed Al-Amari, was one of those. He met our president, my president, Kate Forbes, when she visited Gaza in February. They shared a conversation, a handshake, and a smile. Just hours later, the same day, while rushing to give medical relief to those in need, Mohamed was killed before President Kate Forbes could return back to Geneva. Magen David Adom paramedic Amit Man was another on the 7th of October 2023. She was killed while protecting patients when the clinic she was working at was stormed. Hedaya Hamad was another. She was the director of the Youth and Volunteers Department at the Palestinian Red Crescent in Gaza, a mentor to hundreds, loved by so many of staff and volunteers in the Palestinian Red Crescent. Hedaya was shot dead in February while helping others sheltering within the Al-Amal hospital in Khan Yunus. And in late August, Sabail Ibrahim Adam became the 8th member of the Sudanese Red Crescent to have lost their life since the conflict began there in mid-April last year. A conflict which doesn't get much attention, but is horrific. Its impact on people is horrific. Sadly, I could go on. These people were the best of us on the front lines of humanity. And I think it's only fitting that we dedicate this beautiful peace award to these people who gave their life while trying to save someone else's life. Let's give this to both people. Our local humanitarian workers, embedded within their communities because they come from their communities, cannot evacuate when conflict escalates. In case of Gaza, I can tell you with certainty, they did not want to because they knew they would be needed. They are dedicated, but that dedication should never leave them dead. There is an architecture that protects them. Almost every country in the world has agreed to the laws of war, the legal framework of international humanitarian law, or IHL. This year marks the 75th anniversary of the cornerstone treaties of IHL, the Geneva Conventions. These laws reflect the world's agreement that wars have limits and that parties to conflict must protect those who are not part of the fight. IHL requires all parties to end conflict to ensure civilians and the wounded and sick are not targeted. Ensure secure, safe, unconditional, unhindered, impartial humanitarian access and assistance. Protect medical services and personnel, which includes protection and respect for the Red Cross, Red Crescent emblems, which are symbols of neutrality and protection. Provide information on the fate of the missing, and much more. These are vital entitlements. They must be complied with. But IHL is being ignored more and more, as we see in the conflict today in different parts of the world. The Red Cross, Red Crescent emblems are symbols of neutrality and protection. They mean don't shoot. We are not part of the fight. But today we see growing disrespect for these laws and norms, with ambulances attacked, hospitals bombed, and humanitarian workers killed, despite guarantees from parties to the conflict. This must change, because humanitarians are needed more than ever. And here's where I want to get to the positive, to talk with pride about the good humanitarians can do and how those across our movement do it. I was in Beirut the week before last. There I met Ahmed, a 14-year-old boy living in a shelter in Beirut. His family left their home in southern Lebanon a few weeks earlier, when 1 in the morning, bombs started falling. Ahmed spent the rest of that night petrified on the beach. After getting displaced 3 times in a month, he is now in a shelter supported by the Lebanese Red Cross, unable yet to go back to school, but helped by volunteers to get access to his lessons online instead. I met Jahara too, a young education student who had fled to the same shelter on September 23rd. Without it, and without its volunteer staff, she told me, she doesn't know where she would be and what her condition would have been. Those are just 2 people of millions whose lives right now are difficult, turbulent, but made that little more peaceful by the efforts of those in our Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. And how do our staff and volunteers help? By sticking ferociously to those principles I outlined earlier, taking no side but the side of humanity, protecting life and health, and alleviating suffering wherever it's found. By being impartial, making no discrimination, and being guided solely by the needs of the impacted. By being neutral, not taking sides, dealing with the consequences, not blame. By being independent, working closely with the authorities and within their laws as auxiliaries, but maintaining autonomy and independence. And by running on the power of volunteers, people not motivated by money or other gain, but purely by a desire to help, united for a humanitarian cause and universal in their action. People across our movement apply these principles in high-profile crises, and also in those crises which are forgotten by the outside world. Of course, they are not forgotten by the people who have to deal with them every day. The crisis in Afghanistan, Myanmar, Sudan, the food insecurity crisis in Africa, the Sahel, I visited them in July. The dire floods this year in the Philippines, in Nepal, my home country, Bolivia, extreme heat. I call it a silent assassin because it kills almost 500,000 people every year. We don't hear much about it, but 500,000 people every year. Even the so-called Jutes, extreme cold, causing livestock to die across Mongolia, and with them, livelihoods too. Cholera and mpox outbreaks. Of course, we heard about COVID-19 because it impacted everybody. But there are other health epidemics that affect different parts of the world. And right now, Africa is dealing with these epidemics. These are not crises that capture media attention, nor the attention of the politicians or the decision makers, but we are there too, with our people and with our resources. Let me give you one example how we help. At the IFRC, we have what we call a Disaster Response Emergency Fund, or DREF. Tens of millions of Swiss francs, that's 20s of millions of Australian dollars, which can be deployed fast when a crisis strikes, sometimes in a matter of hours. We don't wait for the emergency to hit the headlines, because too often we know it will never hit the headlines. Instead, we channel that money fast to our member national societies to use as they see best at the local level, because they are there, they know what the solutions should be. And that's what we did in July, after Cyclone Gaemi hit the Philippines, when it hit Leonica Ibanez and her family. The floods literally swept them from their home. She, her husband, and 2 sons spent hours clinging to the top of a tree. When the water level finally dropped, her house was gone. Only the toilet bowl was left, she told one of my colleagues recently. But she is being helped back to a more peaceful life by our Philippine Red Cross teams, given food, medicines, somewhere to sleep. Now able to look to restart the street food business she had before the storm. Did you hear about Gaemi? You probably didn't hear much about that storm. It was overshadowed in the news that week, of course, by the deteriorating situation in Gaza. And I'm sure this one you remember, President Biden's decision to pull out of the White House race. And here in Australia, by a military helicopter crash and the ARIA Music Award nominations. Those were the headlines, not Cyclone Gaemi. But when the crises are not in the headlines, it's the job of our movement to respond to. To be there, regardless of where the world's attention is, to bring peace, or at least more peaceful lives, wherever, whenever we can. But as a movement, we don't only respond to humanitarian needs or see it as an end in itself. We engage confidentially with governments worldwide to stress the need for diplomatic solutions to the conflicts that rage around us. We advocate hard on action to address the climate crisis. I was in COP29 in Baku just before I flew here. Likewise, we understand that to tackle community hopelessness and the sense of exclusion I talked about earlier, we have to restore people's minds as well as protect their bodies. Psychosocial or mental health support, whatever the turmoil or sense of isolation that led to its need, is an increasingly important part of our work. Improving people's resilience or establishing enduring peace takes a holistic and collaborative response. Climate change, conflict, migration, economic inequality, political instability, and mental health trauma are not isolated issues. They are deeply intertwined. They catalyze and multiply each other. That's why we need to have a very comprehensive approach. True peace requires more than just relief. It demands political and diplomatic solutions that governments commit to, long-term investments in resilience, and collective effort to uphold human dignity. The development must be inclusive. It must address root causes of people's hopelessness and sense of exclusion, and create an enabling environment for communities to thrive together, not community fighting against each other, but communities thriving together. And in this world of today, there is resources and capacity. There is enough resources and capacity to cater for everyone. If the development model is inclusive, there is enough to cater for everyone. We need that political wit and commitment, and leaders like the Lord Mayor here who are committed to have that inclusive development. The international humanitarian law must always be respected by all. And everybody needs to speak up. Not only when the IHL are broken by your foes, but more importantly, when they are broken by your friends. The friends must be able to influence friends when they break the IHL. And unfortunately, that's not happening enough. And I think Mohamed touched on this earlier. We must work together to strengthen the protection of civilians, humanitarian and healthcare workers, and all civilian infrastructure, and ensure the dignity of those we serve. We, all of us, whatever we do, wherever we are, can play our part in promoting human values and compassion. In the context of the crisis in the Gaza-Israel conflict, peace means also working for and demanding, of course, the cessation of the hostilities, but also the unconditional release of all hostages and enabling access to monitor conditions for those who have been taken hostages, who have been arrested or detained, all of them. It means calling consistently for protection for civilians, humanitarians, and healthcare workers. It means opening all the border crossings, the land border crossing that already exist for humanitarian relief, and allowing it unhindered around the whole of Gaza, everywhere in Gaza. At its core, this award is not just about the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. It is about the enduring spirit of humanity that our staff and volunteers exemplify every day, everywhere in the world. So thank you again for this remarkable recognition. Let it serve as a reminder that even in the darkest moments, we can find light. Even in the darkest moments, we can find light if we act with compassion, dedication, and solidarity. And thank you, all of you, for being here. Thank you for supporting us, Australians and Australian governments. You have been a very generous supporters to us, generous donors to us, and you have been championing our humanitarian work all the time. We are grateful. Thank you to more broadly for the work you do as advocates for a future where the protection of peace and human dignity stands as a foremost priority. And thank you for the Sydney Foundation for promoting peace consistently and ensuring that the issue of peace stays alive. Even in the darkest moment we are living now, we cannot lose hope. And the work you are doing here keeps that hope alive. Thank you for keeping that hope alive. Together, let us continue to believe in peace, work for peace, and most importantly, live the values of peace in everything we do. Thank you.
Another round of applause for Jagan Chapagain, representing the recipient of this year's Sydney Peace Prize. Thank you so much. And joining us on stage to deepen the conversation and to extend it further are two special guests. First up, we have a professor at the University of Sydney Law School, where she teaches and researches in international law, international humanitarian law, and international criminal law. I also hear she is an avid collector of the quirky Red Cross memorabilia, such as a ceramic music box with a nurse in a Red Cross nurse's uniform, which plays a spoonful of sugar when wound up. Please welcome Professor Emily Crawford, everyone. And next to Professor Crawford, we have an international Red Cross delegate who's been deployed internationally with Australian Red Cross on 21 separate occasions over a 16-year period. Of his 21 assignments, 6 have been to Palestine, 4 to North Korea and Bangladesh, 3 to Afghanistan, and he's only just returned from operations in the occupied Palestinian territory. Please welcome Mike Dennison, everyone. Jagan, I want to start with you because, as we've heard tonight, this year has been the most deadly year for humanitarian aid workers in the world. And I believe I was listening to you on the ABC earlier today, and I heard that it only surpasses the record which was broken the year before. I almost want to ask a childlike question. With international law and the rules of war being violated over and over again, what is happening? What has led to people acting with impunity?
I think this is a million-dollar question, isn't it? What we have seen is over a period of time, and I don't think this happened overnight. We just feel the impact today. Over a period of time, when there is no consistent application of international norms, they start losing their importance and values. And the point I was making earlier is a lot of times what happens is, and this probably also happens in our households, when someone you like breaks the rule, we tolerate it. Or sometimes we even accept it. And sometimes, when the people we don't like break the rules, that's only when we push for application of the rules. And when this happens over a period of time, there is an erosion on the respect. And unfortunately, last couple of years, that's the tipping point we reached. And also, there is a sense of desensitization on how people treat the issues and the crisis and other people suffering. And probably when it happens so often, these issues just become the numbers rather than the suffering of the real people. And that's where we are at the moment.
And in that context, the work that International Red Cross and the Red Crescent movement does, one of the core principles is neutrality, political neutrality. And I imagine that's something that other people might struggle with, the idea of neutrality within a conflict. Some might argue would be to side on the oppressor's side. But why is neutrality such a core principle for the work that you do? What does it allow you to do? And what are the challenges in maintaining it?
Yeah, and I think the application of principle of neutrality is probably one of the most difficult, and at times also becomes controversial. And we recognize that. And probably Mike can talk about it a bit more as he comes from lived experience. This is not that we ignore it. This is a choice the Red Crescent movement has made since its inception. And the choice was made because at the time of the conflict, if you see the origin of the start of the Red Cross, was to support the people in the battlefield. That's the origin idea, and a lot has expanded. the people who are no longer able to fight, the distinction between combatants and non-combatants. So when someone is non-combatants, irrespective of which side they belong to, you provide a life-saving assistance.
A civilian is a civilian.
Civilian is a civilian, and even a combatant who is injured and no longer can fight is non-combatant. And to do that, to be able to do that, you don't take sides. So the focus is purely saving lives. And the access. If you take sides, you don't get access to the places where you've got to take access. Or the work done by our ICRC colleagues, visiting detainees and the prisoners, and having those complex negotiations when the hostages are exchanged. This requires a neutrality. But also to keep in mind is that we are part of a global ecosystem. So there are other organizations who can operate without being neutral. And we are happy that there are those organizations who can do that. But for one organization, Red Crescent movement, is extremely important. That neutrality is important, and this is done by choice.
Emily, as an expert in humanitarian law, I'd really love to get your perspective on this as well. We've seen the targeting of humanitarian workers, medical workers, journalists, and we know this is in violation of international humanitarian laws. They're considered war crimes. Why is it so difficult to prosecute these war crimes?
I think partially it's down to political will. There has to be a will because there is a possibility to prosecute these at the international level through venues like the International Criminal Court, but they have a very limited ambit in as much as they can only go after the most serious violations. They have a severity threshold. So for the most part, you're looking at domestic courts to prosecute. And frequently, the places that are most beset by war, one of the first things to go are functioning civil society organisations. And so if you think about everything that's involved in prosecuting a normal criminal case, getting evidence, interviewing witnesses, finding legal representation, if you have a society that their system has broken down entirely, you don't have someone who can go and get that evidence, interview those witnesses. And so it becomes immensely hard to prosecute in those kinds of situations.
Does time help?
It both helps and it hinders. It helps in as much that what we see now, especially with the advent of things like social media and also with people who go into the field to document in real time what's going on, that you do actually have the ability to gain all of this information, to accrue it, and then you just basically have to wait because, of course, things like war crimes don't have a statute of limitations. But it also doesn't help in as much as if the whole point about these things are to try and hold people accountable at the time or as close to possible, if you are dealing with a situation of a protracted armed conflict, there is no waiting for the conflict to end to prosecute because, as we've seen in places like, say, Colombia, they're dealing with a 50-year-long civil war. So time can be both a help and a hindrance.
And before we throw it over to Mike, I mean, in so many of the conflicts that we see happening in 2024, there is one side with a disproportionate amount of power and weapons. So can you explain a little bit more about the concept of proportionality under international law?
Sure. So proportionality actually is a legal test with regards to protecting civilians. So it's not actually relating to whether one side is more powerful than the other. Proportionality is actually a test that has to be undertaken before any party to the conflict engages in a targeting operation in which they have to make the determination as to whether the military objective that they are targeting, first of all, you have to make the conclusion that it is a military objective. But even if it is a military objective, you have to make the determination as to whether or not any civilian casualties that might accrue in the vicinity of that targeting are going to be disproportionate to the military advantage that can be gained. And militaries around the world have different tests for how they measure this and different levels of how far up the kind of decision chain that gets made. But essentially it is a test to protect civilians who might be caught as collateral damage in a legitimate military attack.
Mike, I'd love to get your perspective. You've been involved in the movement for 16 years in places ranging from Bangladesh, North Korea, Afghanistan, the occupied Palestinian territories. How have the operations of the movement changed over time, particularly at this time of increasingly intense, destructive and vexed conflicts?
I think what's really interesting for me is how little the means of work that are used by the Red Cross have changed over those 16 years. We still operate with the same divisions when we're in the field. We have an assistance team who are looking after health projects and water sanitation and economic security or livelihood. And we have a protection stream that are looking at upholding international humanitarian law and looking after detainees and separated families, for example. So the core activities of Red Cross in the field really haven't changed in the 16 years, but what has changed is the humanitarian space has shrunk. And what I mean is that it's become harder to deliver operations in the field due to a range of factors like borders, checkpoints, rules and regulations, restrictions on importation of goods, and so on. And nowhere have I seen that more clearly evidenced than in Gaza recently. Almost the entire population has been funneled into a very small part of the Gaza Strip in al-Mawasi, and the humanitarian actors are in that very small part of the Gaza Strip as well. So everything is very crowded, and it's difficult to get around that area.
What do you see on the ground that you don't think the rest of the Australian population necessarily sees? Or do you get the sense that people who aren't on the field understand the scale of those obstructions?
I think the thing that stands out most to me is driving from Kerem Shalom crossing into Gaza towards the al-Mawasi safe zone, which is on the other side of the Gaza Strip, and seeing firstly the destruction around Khan Yunis, the city that has been flattened, and then proceeding towards the beach through the tented villages that have sprung up since then. Used to be empty coastal land, but now is wall-to-wall tents with people living in tarpaulins. And winter is coming, and in the 6 weeks I was in Gaza, the temperature had dropped perhaps 4 degrees, and I know that in the coming winter that temperature will drop further, and those tents are not weatherproof. There are going to be high tides coming along the beach, and some of those tents aren't even above the high water level. So what strikes me is the vulnerability of the civilian population and how little they have left of what they have had.
I mean, I feel like so often what is happening in Gaza is framed as something that's happening over there. But of course, Australia being such a multicultural society where, there is a significant Palestinian, Australian population, Arabic being the second most spoken non-English language in this country after Mandarin, it is a personal dimension that Australians feel when they know what is going on in Gaza in particular. That's distressing for people watching it. Then you and colleagues are on the ground. How are humanitarian aid workers coping on the ground?
I think they're coping quite well. And one of the things that does give me some sense of hope is knowing that I am not a target to the conflict. I carry an emblem and I wear it proudly.
Do you feel confident that that's enough protection for you, though, given what's happened in the last...
I am confident because each time I've visited conflict areas, I have not suffered being a target to the conflict. And I know that some of my colleagues who are local staff have been targets. So I'm a privileged person. I understand that.
I'd like to open it up to all of you, and we've heard about the work that Red Cross and Red Crescent do, and obviously there's a way of supporting the work, which is to support it financially. But I'm also wondering what else can Australians do with the fact that now more than ever we need voices of peace and social justice, but the scale and intensity is sometimes so intense that I feel a lot of us are a little bit lost and despairing as to what we can do to contribute to change the scales towards peace and justice. What advice do you have for us?
Maybe I can build on what Mike started. You know, on your question to what had changed. Of course, many things have changed. But maybe I can highlight 3 things. The one thing that has significantly changed is the nature of the conflict. If you look, even when I was young, you know, the wars used to be declared. Mostly the wars were fought between the states, where there was a chain of command. And most of the time, there were even places of war. Actually, you fight war there, not here. That's gone. There's no declaration of war most of the times. None of the wars that's happening now have been declared. Actually, the parties don't even call them war anymore. They invent the new names, so they hope to skirt the IHL. Also, the nature of the conflict, especially with the advance on the weapon system. The weapons used, autonomous weapon systems now. Sometimes the decisions are taken by machines whom to shoot, not by people, or by people who are 10,000 miles away. And these weapons are so sophisticated. When I was in Beirut, I witnessed some of the buildings. They're so sophisticated. This is completely new landscape than we were used to. The second thing that had changed is the intersectionality of the crisis. The crises seem to somehow attract each other. You know, we used to read as a small student, money attracts money. Here it seems crisis attracts crisis. You have war, you have climate-related issues, you have health diseases, you have water crisis, you have societal crisis, you have the economic crisis coming together. And that compounds the impact on population in a massive, massive way. And finally, I think the power of misinformation and disinformation. With the social media, of course, it has brought many good. It has also brought many bad. And this I link to your question, what we can do. How do we contribute by all of us at our level? How do we change the narrative? The narrative of division. Narrative is you are bad, then you are worse than me. Somehow the narrative that exists, unfortunately, even in mainstream media, in social media, in political discourse, is constantly about division, looking for what divides us, rather than looking for what unites us as human beings. And I think each of us can contribute to changing that narrative. And for me, that will be much bigger contribution than the money you can donate to, although you should continue to donate to Red Cross.
Thank you so much, Jagan. Emily, Mike. Give us some homework.
Well, I'm a professor, so I'm happy to do it. And it's actually quite relevant. There is a provision in the Geneva Conventions, so the Geneva Conventions adopted in 1949, included intentionally a provision that said there is an obligation on states parties to the convention, now every country in the world, to instruct their population in the laws of armed conflict. So it should not just be known by soldiers or sailors or people who are in the armed forces, and it shouldn't just be known by legal advisors to the armed forces, that there is actually an obligation on states to ensure that the civilian population know what the rules are. And the rationale behind it was only by us all knowing what the rules are can we call out the violations when they happen within our own countries, not just outside, not just other states, but within our own countries. So my homework to you is find out what the laws of armed conflict are. Find out how they're meant to be applied. Don't go to Facebook, don't go to Twitter. Look at it from reputable places. The International Committee of the Red Cross has a comprehensive website that outlines all of the laws of armed conflict and how they are meant to apply. Look at them and then critically assess those in light of what you are being told also by reputable sources. And then if you find a disjuncture between what the law says should be happening and what people are doing, contact your local member, contact your politicians, tell them that this is not okay, get them to work for what they are paid for to hold our leaders accountable.
Thank you so much, Emily. And finally, Mike, you've seen a lot of the horror up close and quite recently as well. What would you like us going away thinking about, feeling about, talking about?
I'd encourage people who donate money to charities to review the charities that they donate to and consider whether they might support some of the international charities that are delivering humanitarian aid through the world. And there are many, and they're doing fabulous work. And we've heard tonight about Red Cross movement, but we know a number of those names. We've heard about World Central Kitchen providing food in Gaza and in Israel and around the world, of course. We know of many other charities delivering humanitarian work in critical conflict zones. So that's the first thing I'd challenge people to do. Secondly, do write to your local politicians, your federal politicians and your state politicians, because they will respond. They record every single letter coming in and they are acutely aware of what their constituents are saying. And thirdly, I'd say please try as best you can to take a little bit of attention on international affairs, because as we've heard, a lot of these conflicts flow under the radar. They might blow up on a headline once in a blue moon, but they soon disappear from public discourse, and you need to go looking to see what is happening around the world, because it is really concerning, and it's particularly concerning for me as an aid worker, knowing that the changes in the nature of conflict mean that as I go out into the field, I do become a little less safe each time. And I'd like to see some increasing respect for international humanitarian law.
Yeah, hear. Thank you, Mike. Could you please join me in thanking our wonderful guests, Mike, Emily, Jagan. Congratulations once again. Thank you so much for the work that all of you do. Also, one more reminder to jump on and support the Sydney Peace Foundation by scanning that QR code and supporting the work of the movement through the raffle and the silent auction. Winners will be announced 10 p.m. this Thursday, 21st of November. Finally, Amnesty International Australia is a proud supporter of the Sydney Peace Foundation and the Foundation's human rights partner in 2024. So you're about to see their call to arms for how each of us can and should stand up for human rights and our collective humanity. After that, we'll end with a performance by Anieszka, a Mauritian Australian artist who fuses R&B, neo-soul with her Mauritian roots and whose music reminds us what it means to be human. Thank you so much. I've been Benjamin Law. Here is Amnesty International, followed by Anieszka.
Could you be the one Good evening, everyone. My name is Anieszka.
Who you think you are, and who you think you need to be, are they the same? Different realities. Do you speak what you feel? Do you say what you mean? Say what you mean. Is there truth to your words? Or do you concede there can't be one when there are two? Refuse the option to subdue. There's space for you to be true. There's space for you to be you. There's space for you to be true. There's space for you to be you. Hey, hey, true. When you come from a soul, every part of you is whole. Can you survive without a disguise? Do you speak what you feel? Do you mean what you say? Mean what you say? Is there truth to your words? Or is it just a display? There can't be one when there are two. Refuse the option to subdue. There's space for you to be true. There's space for you to be you. There's space for you to be true. There's space for you to be you. Hey, hey, true. You, be you.
Thank you so much. It's truly an honor to be singing here today. I'm Anieszka, an R&B soul artist from Eora, and I'm Australian and Mauritian, and this next song is called Human. I wrote it about all of us being human and learning to love each other just as so, and I really hope that one day we can do that. This is Human.
As a child, I had hope, a strong belief in the unknown. Always dared to speak my mind, no divide. But the world tries to take it away. Colors, they soon turn to gray. We won't let our essence fade. We were born to be loved and free. Can you see through my faults? I am human, but through the pain, hoping we'll transcend. But the world cannot take it away. The strength in us is here to stay. We won't let our essence fade. We were born to be loved and free. Through my faults, I am human but whole. Ooh, la 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 la, obligato, humanité. Can you see through my faults? Can you see I am whole? Pas oublier ton humanité. Après tous ceux qui t'ont passé, ta croyance pour surmonter toute la peine, l'obscurité, l'amour est notre vérité. Oh, pas laisser mon empreinte à paix. Pas laisser mon empreinte à paix. Allez danser, oh oh, allez danser. Allez danser, oh oh, allez danser. Oh la 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 la. Oh la 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 la. Oh la 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 la. Oh la 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 la.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. I hope you've all had a wonderful evening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Anieszka, everyone! That's it. Thank you so much for coming out here tonight. Congratulations to Jagan and Chapagain, the recipient of Sydney Peace Prize for 2024, the International Red Cross and the Red Crescent Movement. Please remember to buy raffle tickets, bid on the silent auction, and to find out more about the Sydney Peace Foundation, go to sydneypeacefoundation.org.au. Go in peace. Have a great night.